My story began one evening when my husband found a lump on my right breast. It was all a bit of a shock to both of us, but it was there. It was sitting there, waiting to be found. I was age 45, from a South Asian background, and had never spoken to anyone about breast cancer or knew what the signs and symptoms were of breast cancer. I knew I needed to see a doctor, so the next morning, even though I'd gone through a real upsetting night thinking, what was this lump? I rang the GP. The only appointment available was with a male doctor, and I declined. My husband was in the background and said, "Why did you say no?" And I said, "Well, good girls don't show their body parts to male doctors." And he said, "That's ridiculous. You need to ring back and make the appointment," which is what I did. Um, and they fitted me in the same day. Otherwise, to see a female doctor, I would have had to have waited at least 4 to 5 days. I spoke to, they also then offered a chaperone and said, "Please come in this afternoon to the surgery." My husband came with me and waited in the waiting room. As I went in to see the GP, there was a nurse in the room with me as my chaperone, and she stayed with me the whole time while the GP asked some sensitive questions and went through a self-examination of my breasts to ascertain what I, said was a lump, which he agreed, and then did a referral to the local hospital for a further tests. That appointment came quite quickly. I then went on and had the mammogram. Now, being aged 45, I'd never been in the national screening program, so I didn't quite know what to expect. I had the mammogram, and then I was quickly taken on to have an ultrasound. My heart sank when I lay on the bed for the ultrasound because I knew something wasn't right. As the doctor started to prod and probe, the biopsy felt like a staple gun, and they took a piece out of the tumor on the right side of my breast. I cried. I remember just holding the pillow really tight and just crying into it, thinking, that's it, I'm doomed. My life is over. I'd never have anybody in my family that had been through cancer or breast cancer. I'd also travelled to the hospital by myself, taken the car, and I remember ringing my eldest daughter to say, somebody needs to drop your dad. My husband needs to come and find me. And when he arrived at the hospital, because I knew I wouldn't be able to drive home, I just looked at him and I said, I'm doomed. I said something called saying Meri Kismet Krab, which means I'm just doomed. I can't believe this has happened to me. I was told to go home and rest for a week, which is, while they sorted out my MDT, my plan of care, which I did, but I found it really hard. I fell to the ground while I waited for them to decide what would be the next course of treatment. I then embarked on, so at the time it was Ramadan, the month of fasting, and my son was at the mosque for the last 10 days. And I remember he said, "Mum, you didn't come to the mosque?" And I said, "No, I couldn't. I just haven't been well." When he came home, he still looked at me very deeply into my eyes and said, "But Mum, you didn't come. Everyone's mum came." And I said, "I know, son." I said, "But I've had this diagnosis and I'm struggling." And he said, "What's the diagnosis?" And I said, "I've been diagnosed with cancer." And his words were, "But I prayed for you." And I took it in that moment that, yes, you prayed for me and this is my test. And I often would say to people, cancer was good for me because it taught me to love myself, self-care, and to focus on me. I quickly then moved to having my surgery. and then after surgery embarked on chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and then active treatment through tamoxifen. So in all, it took probably about 18 months to get through the whole journey. But each day, gratitude filled me. Each day, new connections, new people came into my life. God sent me an army of beautiful people to walk alongside me. Cheerleaders, people that brought food to the house, people that cared for my loved ones. You see, cancer doesn't just affect you, it affects your whole family. I could no longer be there for my husband or for my children. I just had to put a very safe ring around myself and focus on me for the first time in my life. It was about me. And I think that's what cancer does to you. It makes you stronger. Adversity teaches you to um, to do things differently. Life's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's learning to dance in the rain. And I think the end of the journey was that I learned that there were so many taboos within the South Asian community that women didn't talk about openly about their cancer or cancer journeys. I shared through Facebook, and lots of women connected and said, my mother died from breast cancer, but we were forbidden to talk about it. Hence, then it gave me the energy to say cancer was good for me because I learned to love myself, protect myself, think about self-care. But I then went on to set up a charity, Sukoon Through Cancer. Sukoon means peace and tranquility, because I truly believe when you have sukoon in your heart, you can overcome adversity. I went from being isolated, alone, mutilated woman to a very empowered woman that literally fills her life with resilience, self-love and self-care. Complete turnaround.